It's a privilege to speak here. The presence of Shri Amitabh Kant, and we have a galaxy of panelists and chairs, international panel, and I'm delighted to be here. So very quickly, perhaps coming from the coal sector, I look upon you, Chandrabhushan, as a friend. In fact, when I moved from Environment Ministry to this ministry, I lost most of my professional friends. So coal needs support, even while it is phasing down. And your study, more than anything, brings out that, if you drive through Jharkhand, because coal has been there for 100 years plus. And mines get exhausted, they have finite resources for 20, 30 years. So you will see ghost towns, something on the lines of what you see in movies in the US, where mining towns, once mining got over, the infrastructure got left behind, people stayed there until they found alternate locations. And that infrastructure is often just intact and dilapidated and breaking down. So while the talk of energy transition is happening in the world, concerns of just transition are very right, and I congratulate iFOREST for having started this exercise for the rights of the local people and to make sure that there is no social tension and there are no stresses on so many stakeholders, which your study has rightly brought up. I wanted to speak basically on three main strands of thought. Let me introduce the three and then we will go into them in some detail. That this entire process of energy transition and just transition, it needs a strategic approach. It cannot be in a chalta hai attitude. And you rightly brought out in your implementation slides how planning and creation of separate organizations, the funds that you spoke of, the coal cess has been imposed through a constitutional intervention. It's meant for a certain purpose. If it has to be used for this purpose that you highlight, then there'll be changes required in the statute. So this entire thing needs a very scientific approach, also because there's a strong human aspect to this entire problem. The second set of my observations will be that, coal mining and related assets like thermal power plants, the railways, evacuation methodologies, washeries, in some way, not too many though, they are owned by corporate entities, be they PSUs or be they, private sector. So as and when their demand diminishes, they will vanish. They'll protect their balance sheets and their investors' capital, they'll vanish. So ultimately, this baby will be left in the hands of the government. So, we need to be very careful because after all, the public finances of India are also stretched. So political leadership and bureaucracy will have to start thinking about it right away. And the third strand of thoughts, let's not be very despondent. A very large human and physical infrastructure exists in these belts. Some of the earliest origins of the industry, just like the Industrial Revolution came up in the UK, in the Great Britain, due to when the steam engine came up and coal could be harnessed in deploying machinery. Similarly, in India, Charia, Dhanbad, Tata Nagar, all these came up 100 years back. So a lot of resources do exist, which we can deploy in the right earnest for the problem at hand. Going in for a deep dive, nobody could have brought it out better in this study that a place-based approach is the answer to the problem. Because the coal mining areas exist in 7 states. Nagpur area is close to the cities. But if you go to Chhattisgarh, if you go to the Korba district, you went very far flung from the biggest city of the region, which is Raipur. So what are the opportunities and the linkages of these areas with the urban headquarters will vary. So it will have to be a bottoms-up approach. energy transition will precede just transition. So, a good modeling approach, we don't want to start winding up coal before we have been able to put alternate means of energy sources in position. So this will also call for some good energy modeling and energy thinking through. We do have some time on our hands, thanks to the position which India took. We have time till 2070. It may not, coal economy may not last that long. But since we have time, we cannot, rest on our roars. Some kind of a phasing, first phase, second phase, third phase, take up some districts. Probably those districts or those coal mines which are going to deplete first, or those coal mines which are most expensive to produce, high stripping ratio, they may be available for a transition approach much earlier. The assessment of the problem, tribals, what are their incomes, what is the infrastructure, social infrastructure, health, education. Niti Aayog has already done a fantastic job over the last 4 years of the aspirational districts under the leadership of the CEO. So I guess a lot of work has already been done. And a similar strategy like the one adopted for that program can actually be transferred to this strategy. And you have mentioned it in your report in many places. Now, coming to the second strand of thoughts about, what liability, how will the liability be distributed? Today, the coal economy has got private sector. We have opened it up for commercial mining. Lots of coal-based industries are owned by private sector. Public sector is also there. They have resources, but they don't have infinite resources. So who will get the bill? That has to be thought through. Otherwise, you might have, government's budget heavily weighed down this responsibility. India has a long history of presence of public sector in the energy business as a whole. Now, coal itself, for that matter, about 75% of India's coal is produced by Coal India Limited and Singareni Coalfield, namely lignite, which are all public sectors. So, 75% of the problem does devolve on them. This tells me that the government will have to be very careful. The second thing is that the ordinary man in these areas, even the intelligentsia, the media, the leadership may feel that, the coal transition is happening due to an international obligation which government of India has entered into, which actually is not very true. Let me tell you that the economics of renewable energy will itself impact and drive out fossil fuels. But as of now, there may be a thinking in the mind of the people that it's the government which has landed us into this situation. So it is for them to address our problems. My third strand of thought is that the present day laws on post-mining liability, let us say the EC and the FC regime, or the mining plan that we approve, all of them, they only talk of, brick and mortar. They do not talk of the people. So if a mining comes to an end, the mining plan says, how will you close the mine? How will you dump the OB back into the landfill? How will you pay for, compensatory afforestation? But there is no liability that you took the land, you disempowered the people, you took away the agricultural land. So that is also something which will have to be probably built into the commitments of the mining community. So these are some of the things which make me think that the government will have to do a larger share of the weight. And thirdly, just like a typical in the movie, we must come to a happy ending. To my mind, these areas are full of resources, physical and human resources. You just spoke of Korba and the three large mines, Gevra, Dipka, and Kusmunda. And you mentioned that the total mining area involved in that is about 20,000 hectares, 200 square kilometers. I remember as a young officer, I had once spoken to the Secretary of Industries in Government of India, and he had told me that, Madhya Pradesh, where I served for many years, is full of land. So he told me that why don't you find good large chunk of land. And he told me that if you get me vacant land of 20,000 hectares, I will bring you the MNC you name. I can bring you Boeing, I'll get you X, Y, Z. So today in India, because of high density of population, land is a scarce commodity. I think land is the largest asset, and you have devoted one of your slides on which category of the land which will become available and be put to which use. So that is one. The second is that these regions have seen capex, capital deployment, for over 100 years. Even now, every time we do a mine auction, we tell you how much money is going to come to the states, how much capital will be invested to bring these mines into operation. Even today, every year, all put together, at least $7 to $8 billion is being spent in these very areas. So the kind of physical infrastructure that has been created, we give housing to every coal worker. So there's housing, there are roads, the real infrastructure is really being ramped up. From 600 million tons of coal India's production, we are going to 1 billion. So the railway ministry is in concomitant investing evacuation methods. There is power generation you spoke of, I think 6 gigawatt of power generation capacity in Korba. In Singrauli, it's probably 15 gigawatts in those two districts of Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh. So these can be building blocks for a new industrial economy. What about green growth? And these are also the regions which have got a very high level of human capital, skilled, industrious people. Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand have customarily been sources of migration for workers going out to Punjab, Haryana. We saw that when pandemic, happened, such large, train loads of people coming back. So they have all the ingredients. So, but you brought out in your presentation the energy geography. Very interesting. All the solar and wind is happening elsewhere, and all the energy infrastructure is being stripped are elsewhere. Why don't we bring solar to these regions? We are working hard to bring large amounts of solar assets to Coal India's mines. So maybe that will give an initial impetus. So with these three large sets of thoughts, I feel that all it calls for is putting the dots together and crossing the T's. These are, and let's not forget, these regions are already poverty endemic areas. So, I would like you maybe to do a sequel or to maybe from your data cull out and also share with us. These are poverty areas, but not because of coal mining. I mean, I don't know. I have not heard you say that. But, Arvind Netamji is here. I worked in a region when I started my career in Bastar. He was our MP, 1987-88. So these are already areas which are poverty stricken. And you said that if you put the map of the aspirational districts and the mining areas, they seem to overlap. So if coal vanishes, it doesn't mean that, coal vanishing will bring further poverty. It will bring further poverty, but these areas anyway need special attention. And after coal, they'll need even a more part of the attention. So the entire thing, to my mind, with so much competency that exists in the state government, you have, an officer from Chhattisgarh speaking to us. All of us have worked in these areas. Niti Aayog actually has got loads of experience. And in the recent times, the championship we have provided to cooperative federalism. So this is the true need of the hour, that the competencies of the state government and the knowledge that we have in Delhi and other places, think tanks like yours and others, we need to very strategically plan this transition. The biggest threat which people notice is lack of capacity to deliver, a just energy transition. So even if all that money is brought in, even if all this knowledge like you have brought in, Korba template, which could be replicated across other districts, to harness all that knowledge into, a just transition scenario, that capacity, I have all the confidence that we can put it all together, and your study, gives a direction. Thank you very much.